Good morning. This is Dr. Hansa Das, and today we talk about the second part of the new economic policy in Russia. Lenin placed a lot of hope in his new policy. After the setback of war communism to the economy and the country as a whole, Lenin felt it inevitable to introduce a policy, to introduce a capitalist experiment into the economy in order to revive the economy which had drowned underneath the policies of war communism. So, the new economic policy introduced by Lenin was a form of mixed economy, and as already stated, Lenin was planning to bring in certain elements of capitalism into the Russian economy. So, an overwhelmingly private agriculture, legalized private trade, and small scale manufacturing was planned by Lenin. And in the previous video, we have talked about changes in agriculture and in industry. The setbacks to the economy, the setbacks to agriculture and industry under war communism, and the changes that came about in agriculture and industry through the new economic policy. Today's video focuses on changes in the following: what changes came about in labor and trade unions, trade and distribution, and finance. So, today we are going to talk about these three sectors of the economy. So, NEP introduced a number of changes in the position of the proletariat and consequently in that of the trade unions. The great bulk of the means of production in industry and the transport system remained in the hands of the proletarian state, and the Communist Party and the Soviet government were now adopting special methods to implement the general policy of transition from capitalism to socialism. They were making better preparations for a new offensive against capitalism. In particular, a free market and capitalism, both subject to state control, were now being permitted and were developing. On the other hand, the socialized state enterprises were being put on what is called a profit basis, that is, they were being organized on commercial lines. So, the labor and trade union policy under new economic policy was an integral part of the whole problem of efficiency of national economy, and Lenin strived to make the economy efficient and to overcome from the setbacks which war communism had uh, thrown on the economy. So, there would be a number of functions of the trade unions to perform under the new economic policy. First of all, the proletarian state would permit freedom to trade and the development of capitalism only within certain bounds and only on the condition that the state regulates private trade and private capitalism. So, one of the main tasks of the trade unions would be to protect in every way the class interests of the proletariat in its struggle against capital. Uh, the second important function that the trade unions would have to perform under NEP was the transfer of state enterprises to the so called profit basis, which was inevitably and inseparably connected with the new economic policy. And it would undoubtedly be the duty of the state unions to protect the interests of the working people and to facilitate as far as possible the improvement of their standard of living. uh, as long as the classes existed, the class struggle was also inevitable. So, in the process of transition from capitalism to socialism, the existence of classes was inevitable, and the program of the Russian Communist Party stated that they were taking only the first steps in the transition from capitalism to socialism. So, the task of the trade unions would be to facilitate the speediest and smoothest settlement of disputes between individual contingents of the working class and to the maximum advantage of the groups of workers they represent. Only this development could lay the foundations for the material and cultural welfare of the working class. And One of the tasks of the uh, or one of the tests of the success of the activities of trade unions would be the degree to which they would succeed in averting mass disputes in state enterprises to protect the interests of the masses of workers in all respects and to remove in time all causes of disputes. At the same time, it was specified that the trade union members would not subscribe to any specific political views, as well as in respect of religion, the trade unions would be non partisan. All that must be required of trade union members in the proletariat state would be that they should understand the necessity of uniting the workers' forces for the purpose of protecting the interests of the working people. The proletarian state would encourage the workers to organize in trade unions. But of course, the trade unions could have no rights without duties. Now, the trade unions would also collaborate closely and constantly with the government, all the political and economic activities of which were to be guided by the Communist Party. Being a school of communism in general, the trade unions would, in particular, be a school for training the whole mass of workers and eventually all working people in the art of managing socialist industry and gradually also agriculture. So, the trade unions part in the activities of the business and administrative organizations of the proletarian state would take the following forms. First of all, the trade unions would help to staff all the state business and administrative bodies connected with economies, like nominating their candidates for them, stating their length of service, experience, and so forth. Secondly, one of the most important functions of trade unions would be to promote and train factory managers from among the workers and the masses of the working people generally. And thirdly, the trade unions would take a far greater part in the activities of all the planning bodies of the proletarian state in drawing up economic plans and also programs of production and expenditure of stocks of material supplies for workers, etc. So, the list of the major functions of the trade unions in the work of building up socialist economy would be drawn up in greater detail by the competent trade union and government bodies. At the same time, contact with the masses, that is, with the overwhelming majority of the workers and eventually of all the working people, would be the most important and most fundamental condition for the success of all trade union activity. The trade unions would conduct all the activities or systematically collaborate in the activities of all the government departments concerned, not from the point of view of the interests of the given department, but from the point of view of the interests of labor and of the economy as a whole. The Communist Party, the Soviet bodies that conduct cultural and educational activities, and all communist members of trade unions would devote far more attention to the ideological struggle against petty bourgeois influences. Uh, Definitely, because the working class would have to tackle this bourgeois influence. And uh, especially because NEP was bound to lead to a certain strengthening of capitalism also in the economy. Now we come to trade and distribution. The changes that came about under new economic policy under trade and distribution. So, first of all, it was replacing requisitioning with tax in kind meant a return to private trade. We have seen in the previous video how Prodraz Verstka was replaced by Prodnalog, and the requisitioning or the the forcible seizures of peasant surpluses was replaced with a tax in kind, and now the state could collect only reduced quantities of grain from peasants, and peasants were allowed to sell their surplus production in the market and earn a profit for themselves. In this way, state rationing became impossible, and as already said, the peasants could sell their surplus in the open market without any compulsion, and they could also reap the benefits or the profit of selling their surpluses. Lenin realized that the freedom of trade means, in a certain measure, a development of capitalism, but added this capitalism will be under control, under the supervision of the state. So Lenin was all out to introduce certain elements of capitalism into the economy, and but he specified that this introduction, or this capitalist experiment, would be completely under the control and under the supervision of the state, uh, so that uh, the entire economy would not be converted into a capitalist economy at once, as the opponents of Lenin had suggested. So, the formation of an internal market and the development of monetary exchange was an important feature of the new economic policy. Now, the institutional organization of trade under new economic policy was threefold: trade conducted by private traders, by cooperatives, and by state organs, and also encouragement was given to retail trading through private individuals. This was certainly a complete reversal of the policy of war communism. What we had seen under war communism, the new economic policy completely reversed it. Now, a major development in trade and distribution came about with the decree of July 1921, according to which any person over 16 could obtain license to carry on trade in shops, public places, markets, etc. At the same time, petty private trading came out into the open, and cooperatives were also given favor under the NEP. Uh, A vacuum was created into the organs of the state by the insistence on trade to be conducted on market principles without any state interference. And now we come to finance, the changes that came about under the new economic policy in the financial sector. So, NEP, when the concept of local barter came up, that is, buying and selling in a wide market, monetary policy became important. And when it was uh, felt that there would be a return to capitalism, then return to money economy became inevitable. And then an important development was again the decree of June 1921, according to which all limitations on economic exchange were removed, and the monetary policy was promoted. Also, a stabilized currency and a balanced budget was envisioned by the new economic policy. A state bank was re established in order to build the entire banking system. Now that we have considered the changes in agriculture, industry, trade unions, trade and distribution, and finance, an assessment of the new economic policy becomes essential. So, there were opponents of the new economic policy, and not all Bolsheviks welcomed it. This new economic policy could be called Lenin's strategic retreat, and this strategic retreat had two basic objections. First of all, it sacrificed a planned economy based on heavy industry. This was the allegation of the opponents of the new economic policy, the opponents to Lenin's capitalist experiment, that it completely sacrificed planned economy, since now the economy was based on heavy industry. The second allegation that was placed on the new economic policy was that affluent peasants and small entrepreneurs would threaten socialism and all gains of revolution. But definitely, all these fears were groundless, because the new economic policy was a well thought out policy by Lenin, and Lenin had already explained that a return to capitalism would not mean the introduction of capitalism uh, in the fullest. And it was also explained by Lenin that all power would remain under the control of the socialist state. So the Communist Party retained full monopoly of power, with which it could determine not only economic but cultural and political direction of the new Soviet state. So the new economic policy was a big step in the direction of changing the Soviet economy, of changing the Russian economy, and of bringing it out from the setbacks which the war communism had caused to the economy. So, this was the end of the lecture on new economic policy, which we have seen in two parts. And hope you liked the video. Please place your comments in the comment box, and please wait for my upcoming video on Russian history. Thank you.